Well, good evening and welcome to the Monday, November 21st, 2016 Washita City Council workshop meeting, and for the start of the meeting, a joint workshop meeting with the members of our Planning Commission as well. Rose, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Boger.
Here.
Councilmember Wagner.
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel.
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker.
Here.
Councilmember Greenlee.
Here.
Councilmember Corsi.
Here.
Councilmember Lindsay. Now Planning Commission. Councilmember Lamb, or excuse me, Commissioner Lamb. Commissioner Reinhardt.
Here.
Commissioner Paps.
Here.
Commissioner White.
Here.
Commissioner Wagner.
Here.
Commissioner Gearhart.
Here.
Commissioner Dodge.
Thank you. I know Joyce had intended to be gone this evening. Hopefully we'll see Mr. Lamb, and I don't see Mr. Dodge's nameplate, so do we assume that
He is not going to be here this evening.
Okay, thank you. First item on the agenda are any members of the public that would like to address council before we get started. Come on up. Good evening, Ken.
Thanks. Ken Navidi, 2413 Southeast 283rd. And of course I brought my kids with me, so I wanted to be able to talk here before the meeting. I was a member, I'm a member of the TAC meeting here on the urban growth boundary, expansion up into the northwest. And on the last meeting, they kind of handed out kind of the commercial districts, and the commercial district CV would be about 5 or 4-ish or 5-ish of the acres, and the northwest corner would be on my property. Of course, I'm not currently inside the city yet. We haven't been annexed, but just reviewing what CV is on here, I mean, there is a lot of X's basically saying that I can't do a lot of different things on my property. I'm not too enthused about having CV on my property. In fact, I question the whole idea of even having commercial development anywhere up there. I mean, down off of Crown Road, we have plenty of commercial development that's down there. I think the real estate office that's down there, and plenty others that just aren't being filled. There's just not enough people coming in right now to justify commercial, especially in that area. Also, I question rerouting 23rd to match the city of Camas. 23rd has been there for hundreds of years, or as long as I've known. And the school district routed the road that comes into Crown Road that way to appease a property owner that was in their city. So if I feel I should be able to keep my road out that way, and rather than having the road cut across my property in the future. That's about all I've got. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to address council before? Okay. Moving to the agenda, council and planning commissioners, I'm going to move some things around on here. Mitch, I'm assuming it's item I that we really want to focus on at the start of the meeting.
Correct.
Go ahead and move to item I, community development, the urban growth area comprehensive plan and zoning map changes.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, Commissioners. Believe it or not, since 2014, we've been working on this in one way or another. And I'm happy that we're actually approaching, hopefully, an end to this, at least a beginning of what can be up there. We have undertaken a lot with the help of the team from Berger ABAM. We had several technical advisory committee meetings, and the plans that you see behind you are representative of that. One of the things that I did need to note too is that there is an action item on this that I have asked the mayor to put on the council under consent agenda, is we need to set the hearing for this item on January 9th. And I inadvertently didn't get that on the consent agenda, but I would like ask that would be put on the consent agenda, set the hearing for this item. And in particular, the item that is in question that we will be taking action on specifically relates to the comprehensive plan change and the zoning boundary within our city limits in that northwest urban growth area. We will be looking at the design and the concept and the plans, and we'll be adopting those as well as refinements to our preferred alternative plan. But in terms of an action that needs to take place inside of the city, it's this map right here, and that's the comprehensive plan map. It's pretty generic. It's one comprehensive plan designation of urban low. And then the zoning designations would break down in consistent with our preferred alternative plan. So that is the action that will take place on January 9th, as well as adoption of the regulations associated with that. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to the whole group on this side of the aisle here, and start it off with Scott Kyler from Berger ABAM.
Thank you, Mitch. Mr. Mayor, members of the Planning Commission and Council. It's been a pleasure working here over the last year with the Technical Advisory Committee. And maybe we got to hear from one member, but maybe just a quick show of hands. How many folks do we have present that have been helping out here over the last year? So we've got several members. A couple more, so 4 or 5. We had another group because we were taking some employment designation out and replacing it with various residential designations on the preferred concept. Anybody from the City Center focus group helped us out? Good. These folks have been giving a lot of their time. I will speak briefly.
I would
David,
mention Mike Lamb was also on both of those.
we've got Mike. Thank you. David Sacamano, also of Berger ABAM, our urban design lead, will talk a little bit about some of the plan concepts after my introduction. We're going to hear from Dana Beckwith, and Dana's with Global Transportation Engineering, and he'll talk about the traffic study, and that has refined the concept plan. Eric Hovey will speak a little bit about the code provisions. And I'm going to call on Paul when we need to go back to the numbers. So Paul Lewis is also here. So we've really got planning, engineering, and design well covered on the team. We appreciate the work, and we're cognizant of your 11-point agenda, so we're trying to get this done in 15 or 20 minutes. I will say the end result, as Mitch had indicated, is in January, getting ahead of that or closing out that moratorium for the city center portion shown on the screen, and replacing that with comprehensive plan and zone designations by the end of January. I think that most of you will recall that several hundred acres of commercial employment land across the northern half of the northwest urban growth boundary, and including portions of the northeast urban growth boundary, we're seen as overreaching in terms of their marketability and difficult to reach in terms of transportation, roadways, and infrastructure. And there was some very strong support for bringing in various single-family residential designations and very limited neighborhood-serving commercial of up to 6 acres per plan. So Mitch has described, and I'm going to apologize, I may need to go over there with the pointer, but the maps are behind you, and on the left is the preferred concept plan with street sections, local and collector, and trails. We also have from left to right the preferred concept plan, refined only to ground truth the roadways and get a couple of sessions in with the TAC. And then center, you can see the yellow comprehensive plan designations, and they have the orange neighborhood serving commercial, CV, and the dark line showing the city limits for the northwest UGA. And then to the far right then, as you see the various colors, the lighter density is yellow at 1,500 acre minimum lot sizes and goes to the dark color at a minimum 5,000 square foot lot under your existing zones. So stakeholder input, a visioning session, lots of input from the stakeholders in the City Center Focus Group. And as you've heard tonight, even so, we're still, it's a working session, and there are some issues that the TAC has not fully resolved, but I think, in fact, We're getting ready to go to hearing, and I would just add to Mitch's request for the council on the 9th of January, we'd also like to plan a session for the Planning Commission December 13th. So I mentioned what we have done since we saw you last, and I think I would just point out that these are primarily local and collector roadway improvements. And the only other couple of things I'd like that you'll hear more from David for you to know is there was an idea that the primary curbside parking for the commercial district that is near Crown at 23rd would actually have its own slip lane for commercial access and not have multiple movements at that busy intersection, so that there would be a curb cut in to that commercial frontage with parallel parking to keep it live and active, and not multiple backing movements and parallel parking movements right there in the northwest corner of the northwest. There are many sort of traffic findings, but I'm going to ask Dana to talk about the highlights, and the same with the code, and we'll be also taking any questions that you have tonight. David?
Hi, good afternoon. David Sacamano with Berger ABAM. So I'll talk just very briefly about the street sections. So working through the TAC, we made some proposals on conceptual street sections, and these are based upon City of Washougal standard street right-of-ways and standard street sections. There are 4 street sections that we're proposing for both the urban growth areas. The first one is an urban collector, which would be the highest volume street, and those are indicated on the plans. It's hard to see from here, but I think you can thumb through and see it in your packet. As Scott mentioned, there's an urban collector with a commercial access, which is the slip lane that provides a buffered parking separation from the main traffic flow. This would be primarily used in front of the commercial areas. The next street classification is a residential access. Again, a street section that provides bike lanes, on-street parking, sidewalks. And then lastly is the residential local, which is our lowest volume street. And that's a general two-way system with parking on either side. The residential local streets are not depicted on the plans. Those, the assumption is those would be developed as those lots develop. And so the street, minor street grid would be developed when the projects come in for development. Again, one of the goals that we tried to achieve with this is to provide a complete street, a roadway that moves vehicles safely through the urban growth areas, but also provides the amenities for bike lanes and pedestrians. All the concepts we're looking at, trying to integrate low-impact stormwater management where feasible. And then the street sections that have the landscaped medians, both on the edges and down the center of the road, do have the ability to work well with grade. Obviously, there's quite a bit of topography in both of these areas. Those landscape areas can then be used to help mitigate the grade and make those roads a little bit more feasible when constructing them in this area. So I'll turn it over to the next person, but if there's questions, I'll be happy to respond to those later.
Good evening. I just want to talk to you a little bit about the traffic study that we did for these the northwest and northeast UGAs. Basically, what we were trying to do was provide good east-west and north-south connectivity in each of these areas. I think we've done a pretty reasonable job at getting to that. One thing, when you have these land use changes in there, what you create is a more pronounced AM and PM commute period for folks, because what used to be a mix of commercial and residential is now a predominantly residential area. So you're going to see an AM peak going south and a PM peak going north more than you would see today. We looked at it from an operational standpoint and also from a safety standpoint. And basically, from the safety standpoint, what we came up with was, as this starts developing out, we want to make sure that we're looking at the speeds along those roadways, posting those speeds so that people understand what's what the speed limits are out there. Going out, doing field reviews, we kind of noticed that there's some areas that are posted and others that aren't. So that can help alleviate speed concerns. And as Scott had mentioned, we're upgrading these facilities to collector and local streets. And we also took a look at the transportation system that's feeding those areas. And kind of what we came up with was that in general, if you're upgrading those roadways feeding those areas like Crown Road, Woodburn, 32nd, 39th, you're going to start taking care of a lot of the other safety issues like sight distance concerns, narrow rural roadways, curvy roadways. So what I kind of wanted to do was focus a little bit on the Northwest UGA. I'll start up at Crown Road, 23rd. The city of Camas has identified that the west leg of 23rd will eventually one day, it's got a future alignment that aligns it closer to the eastern leg. Once you do that, you've got about 150-foot offset on that intersection. And that can create operational issues in the long run because that's not a lot of room in between intersections if people are turning. So we are recommending realignment of the east leg to match in. As part of the roadway network internally, we've got a collector which is currently 30th Circle. Adding that collector in there provides great that east-west connectivity. Can I walk over there? Yeah. You got it?
We can't pick you up on the mic, is the problem.
Okay, I'll talk loud. Or at least on this one. So this roadway right here is basically 30th Circle. And what that does is it alleviates a lot of the traffic off of So basically, this right here is 30th Circle, and adding that collector in really alleviates a lot of the traffic off of 23rd. And what that does is builds capacity for the future when things keep building to the north.
Can you point out on there where Camus's 23rd currently comes through?
Yeah, it's right here. Am I shaking enough for you? It's right here.
So just to the south of where.
Right, and it actually, in the future, it goes straight. So there actually, there's a future realignment of that.
Okay.
Doesn't that road just go into the development and by Woodburn School there? Is that the road you're talking about?
Yes.
And they are considering that a major east-west road, you said? Or,
Well, there's 330 homes in there or will be eventually.
Yeah.
And I believe there's another resident or subdivision to
west.
the west that's coming in the future as well. So basically, up in that area, we didn't really see the need for any traffic signal upgrades in that area. But what we did see is, as is predominant today, is there's very few routes to the south. You've got Crown Road, you've got Woodburn, which connects into 18th and then Washougal River Road, which is the main access down to SR 14. Those are a concern today, and they will be in the future as well. But we've got some mitigations that we think will work and help make those work at least through the next 20 years. Also, another intersection of concern is Washougal River Road and 18th. There's some pretty high speeds going through there, as well as we've looked at the kind of what we would call the south and so 18th and then O Street. Possibly realigning those in the future to get a better 90-degree access to Washougal River Road so that you can see better in that area. And then on the northeast UGA, basically we've got, what you will see is Southeast 32nd is the main route from the northeast UGA down to the south, and is the main access to SR 14. Over the next 20 years, you'll see that the traffic's going to increase, not only because of the northeast UGA, but because of future development in eastern Washougal as well. As the traffic builds along 32nd, it's going to push its way to the east to the next available roadway, which is 39th, allowing access down to basically Evergreen Way, and then you'll either have to go east to Gifford or west to 32nd. What we see is that increase along 39th will warrant eventually in the future traffic signals, one at 39th and J and one at 39th and Evergreen to handle that additional traffic in there. Those are the bigger concerns that we found out there.
Yep. Can you identify on the map the portion that's the Navidi property that Ken Navidi just spoke about? Or is that commercial area? And I assume it's that one area.
but Ken's pretty much that corner there.
The northwest of the northwest.
35 acres there.
Your acreage?
It's on the northwest corner,
Yeah, you got about 35 acres there?
25.
25 acres, right in there.
Is it pretty much the whole thing, or?
The majority of it,
And is
in orange.
that designation set by the county? Or?
No, it's proposed being set by us right now.
Is there some reason we've identified that
Yeah, not in,
particular
yeah,
corner?
not in January. Yeah, remember this is, what's in the black right here? That's in
Yeah,
the
that's
city right now. That's all we're changing in
I understand.
January. What we're looking at is now refining that preferred alternative plan that we've identified that area as commercial. And then we'll work with the county in order to change that.
I see. And is there a reason that we identified that particular corner versus another part?
We actually had other areas, we had, at one point through the TAC process, we had identified areas on this side, and ultimately what we came down to was that this made the most sense, given the intersection and the proximity to Camas as well, that was the area that we should have that commercial for the area.
Why don't you explain what CV is?
Yeah, convenience commercial is the designation. It's an existing designation that we have today, and we use that as a base to start for this, for the zoning in this area.
Right.
It's like neighborhood commercial?
Yeah,
Well,
like
it's even less than
gas
neighborhood.
station
Yeah.
or something like that. Is that what you're kind of?
We actually said no on the gas
No.
stations, yeah.
And of course, that whole northern portion of the northwest UGA was employment center at the outset.
Right, and we asked for that to go away.
We're working on that. That's this process right now. We've identified it as being residential and commercial, and then we'll continue to work with the county to update that. If it was to annex, and we had our preferred plan and we have our comp plan designated for that, then it would come into the city and be commercial.
We hadn't, of course, we have heard some concerns with the plan, and that's a new one of late. So we could certainly look at that, but I think the answers you've heard is where those kind of four corners come together in each plan is a limited commercial, that would work. That could be over time supported by the households that would develop at a higher rate. And then there are some implications of moving some of that commercial downtown. And I thought as a transition, I could have Paul talk for 2 minutes to the numbers, and Eric could talk a little bit about the code so you would understand these designations. Paul?
Good afternoon. Just real quickly to reorient the sort of bigger picture in terms of the net residential acres. Under the prior zoning, or I guess the existing comp plan designations with the employment center land, there was roughly 180 net acres of residential. Under the preferred alternative plans, there's going to be 480 acres of residential. So it used to be roughly 230, 250 acres of commercial, and it'll be reduced to those two gross 6 acre, but they're actually net after you take out infrastructure and critical areas, nets about a total of 6 acres in both of those, both the northeast and northwest UGA. In terms of dwelling units, under the old plan, there was just over 1,000. There'll be just over 2,100 now. And in terms of the population capacity, I think you remember one of the findings from the initial work was that we were just barely covering the projected population growth with all of the residential land that we had, predicting out to 2035 and the total population that we needed to accommodate at that point. Just about 107% of the demand that we had covered with available buildable residential land. With this change, we'll be closer to the 140, 150% range in terms of being able to accommodate population. With the reduction in the employment lands, we'll still be able to accommodate the projected employment growth. Although if you recall, we were more than double on the employment side before, and under this plan we'll be in the 110% without putting any additional work into accommodating higher density employment in the town center zone. We think there's opportunities based on the conversations we've had with the focus group, but also in your existing zoning and your existing development code, that the densities, the job densities downtown will be greater than we had originally estimated. So just to give you some context.
So batting cleanup, Eric Eisman, E Squared Land Use. Zoning code conversations are usually minutia detail. I'm here to give you the highlight reels about what we're proposing in the zoning code. So starting with the commercial area, the CV, convenience commercial, it's an existing zone within your code right now. It's designed to be small scale commercial, neighborhood oriented, pedestrian friendly, visually attractive, and buffered and screened from nearby residential areas. Also, what we heard in the TAC is that the areas should have quiet zone type of requirements for commercial businesses, particularly restaurants or if a small bar goes up there. So the highlight reels would, for those two orange areas in the northeast and the northwest, would be, again, as I said, commercial establishments that might be eating and drinking related could have a quiet zone, a limitation on when they would need to close in order to protect the quiet of the area. Retail establishments would be capped out at a 20,000 square foot maximum for the single retail establishment. Espresso drive-throughs would be allowed, but they would have to take access off of a feeder road, a frontage road, as opposed to the primary roads, the collector roads. We heard at the last TAC meeting that lodging should be allowed, but at small scale, 12 units an acre is what's being proposed. Someone asked about office or about the gas stations. That would be prohibited in that area. So that's what the convenience commercial is. It would also rely heavily on your existing design standards that you've adopted several years back for that zone. Related to the residential, the highlights there primarily would be maintaining the zoning that's in your code right now, the zoning designations for varying levels of density, but providing buffering between the different zones. So when you look at the maps and you see the yellow going into a green, into an orange, into a brown, those lots that would be at the perimeter of those zoning districts would be buffered so that you get a blending, if you will, of lot sizes between the two zoning districts. The other highlight reel would be view corridors, so that you have some magnificent views of those to the south. And so on north-south access roads over the public right-of-way or public trail system or the easements that are there for utilities, you try to maintain corridors so that the public would have a chance to see what's ahead of you. So we've defined what those corridors might be and how they would be measured, and that they would be at certain elevations in the different zones. Again, remembering that the zoning restrictions only apply to the lands once they're annexed into the city. This is a 20-year long-term plan. There would also be architectural standards in place, similar in some ways to what you have in the code right now, but they would apply to long plats, not short plats, 9 units or less. You'd limit the type of facade improvements so that no house on a same block looks the same. So you'd have some variety, but there would be a menu-driven approach to architectural standards so that you have an adopted list of balconies, porches, those kinds of things, and the developer gets to pick from those menus, pick at least 3. Parks and trails are recommended in the zoning code as well. Developments of 50 units or larger would be required to provide dedicated park and open space for the residents of that area. Centrally located so that they're pedestrian accessible unless they're maintained by the homeowners association, and then they could be spread out. The standard that we're proposing is a fairly low standard of a ½ acre for 50 units or more right now. So those are and the park space that would be dedicated. 50% of that ½ acre for 50 units would have to be usable for the public as well. So those are the highlights from the zoning code. Thank you. I'll turn it back to Scott.
Very much appreciate your time tonight. I'm sure you may have some questions. I did want to note, as I spoke to someone coming to the door, we had one map update in the center of the northwest UGB zoning where we have a local street. And that particular connection, here we go. That particular connection is mid-block to the east. There we go. And is correct on the boards behind you, if that's causing any concern for folks that are here tonight. And certainly we'll want to take any questions that you may have at this time.
Michelle?
In regards to 30th Circle up there, as far as
There it is.
the main collector road there, what are your feelings on shortening the width, getting rid of the divider, and you know, a developer's concerns over costs and soil and such, and how do you feel about that? As your team has looked at this, is it an impossibility to get?
Well, first of all, some of the documentation that you have in front of you tonight Berger hasn't seen. We just got that today about,
okay.
in terms of infiltration and soils and things like that. Scott and I had a very brief conversation about what was happening tonight. We have this proposal, and then we're going to be talking about a development agreement later that has something different. I mean, that's a discussion that we need to have, but Berger hasn't seen that documentation as far. I mean, I think they've seen the one rendering, but they haven't seen the documentation behind that was provided today.
So, okay, so in the future, before I'm prepared to make a decision on that particular development agreement, I'd really like to get their opinion, since they've been studying and researching this, on how they feel about it, and its potential impacts, just as advice to the council.
Right, and I think that was one of the things that we talked about last time. I said I wasn't sure that we would have that here for this meeting tonight, but we would probably have some discussion about that, and definitely have to have that discussion at our December 5th hearing.
Okay,
For the development agreement.
all right, yeah, as long as we're gonna have it, that's wonderful.
I just didn't want to put Scott on the spot for
Right.
something that he hadn't seen yet.
See what he does.
I think it's just safe to say these are takeoffs from your standards. We've obviously talked about some modified standards. Accessing commercial was one of them. But as Mitch indicated, we're going from concept into code and standards, so haven't formulated any particular range of solutions there.
And one point I think I will make, though, is that even the Berger proposal, neither one, and the applicant's proposal on the development agreement side, neither one proposes parking along that. That was one thing that we all agreed on, that independently agreed on, that there wouldn't be parking along that collector, so.
David?
I understand that the folks in Washington DC and Olympia want to impose on us their views of what our streets should look like. And that's a 2-lane road, a median in between with some kind of a swamp to collect water, and bike lanes on either side and possibly parking on either side. Can you give me a good engineering reason why we should go with something like that?
Well, I do appreciate, Mr. Counselor, the question. I'm not an engineer, but I think there are a range of solutions. We certainly have identified in this process where we think off-site trails are more appropriate, where we think connected pedestrian facilities are appropriate through neighborhoods. The scale of the streets range in the, as Mitch indicated, in the commercial, from those that may accommodate parking to those that even have a slip lane for parking. The answers vary with each community, and these were appropriate takeoffs from your current standards, but I think we could have a pretty long discussion and include engineers on where you land on those.
Your answer addresses the political constraints. What I'm looking for is there a good engineering reason to do this?
There's just a good practical review reason to have standards.
I understand the standards.
Yeah.
Why should we go with 2 lanes, with bike lanes and
Oh,
and
yes.
swamp in between?
So I do understand that question, and that is more direct. The shared lane application of local streets is commonly used.
When you say
And the
shared-
collectors, that means the bicycles are in the travel way with low volume and lower capacity local streets.
When you say shared concept, you're talking about bicycles.
Bicycles and cars, and then as you go up into the collector range, because of the speeds, is typically the need to have the bicycle lanes. And of course, when we go off-street, we like to have a nominal 10 feet so you have room for bikes and pedestrians. So there are some rules that make good safety sense and accommodate all modes. But there are various answers on how you put those
I have to
together.
disagree with you. When you put bicycles on the street with high speeds, I don't think that's safe. And I say that as a bicyclist.
Yeah. And that's fair, and I do think that the standards are something that are done with traffic engineers and civil engineers. I think the concept we've applied in terms of urban design includes safety, such as some bulb outs for pedestrian crossings, some dedicated collector bike lanes, but there are different ways to manage those, including carrying the bikes through the slip lane for the commercial and getting them off the main street, which goes to your point.
I regret the restrictions you operate under. I admire you for dealing with them and appreciate your advice on how to go.
Other questions? Commissioners, council members?
Yeah.
Ernie?
And this is for Eric. I'm wondering, on the architectural design standards, were any other community standards used as a model for this? And if so, what communities were those?
Yes, we looked at standards in DuPont and in Ridgefield, here in Clark County, as 2 examples.
And do you know how long Ridgefields have been in effect? Like how many years they've had those standards?
Those, that menu-driven approach, oh my gosh,
It's a long time?
yes.
Okay,
Yeah, it's been exercised over many, many developments there.
okay, thank you.
Larry?
Yeah, we're talking about the streets. I know you say it's just conceptual, these pictures, but they're kind of like the same as what they wanted to put on E Street back when they did the development there. And with that center thing, my concern is the fire apparatus, when they want to travel from one end to the other, there's no place for people to pull over and the big engines to get around. These streets aren't hardly wide enough for an engine as it is, and no place for people to pull over out of the way. And they wanted to put that garden sewer thing in the middle of E Street, and now it's just got the 2 little islands with the flashing lights for crosswalk at 20th and 24th. And they got a turn lane all the way down the whole E Street. And that way the engines can get from point A to point B around cars as they pull over to the bike lane. because the bike lane's not big enough for an automobile. So that turn lane, they can utilize to get by.
Gotta remember there ever being any storm system going down the middle of East Street on
No,
any.
they proposed that in the conceptual drawings.
Rain gardens?
Well, whatever you call it, the centerpiece with trees and things.
I'll take your word
Planting
for it, I don't
media.
ever remember that. I always
You've got
remember
this-
a turning lane.
You've got the storm system at 20th and 8th, right by the school. And you've got a concrete block at 20th and 8th.
Yeah, the one at Hathaway is not a storm system at all. What's in the middle, it's a safe haven that has
Yeah.
some landscaping with it, but it's not part of our storm system at all.
I think there's some greenery in there though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
some landscaping.
Same thing is true at 20th. It's a safety island. It's not a storm feature.
And I guess it would, oh, excuse me, if I might just add, our scope includes the comp plan and zone changes and conceptual sections for roadways, so there's room to work some of these details out as you head down this path. Go ahead.
What's our latitude to go to lower housing density than what you're proposing here?
Certainly, it's really at the council's pleasure what density you select, and as you'll recall from our last sessions, the 6 dwelling units per acre is a target for the community within the region. I think we know, Paul, from looking at the numbers, we're a bit below that. We're just marginally under where we started, but that doesn't mean you couldn't take a different approach. We think this is a reasonable density for these areas, but you could say we really want to move that density into downtown and put more pressure into growing residential in other areas of the city.
Well, that was my preference. I heard and Paul might want to answer this. I heard a figure of 140%.
Oh, yeah, there's a market latitude that you need, I think it's somewhere in the 20-30% just to not constrain growth. So, and you're looking out 20 years, so if we take 100%, you would have some constraint. 130%, you'd have market expandability. So you're a little bit high at 150% to manage and have some additional capacity into the future. Paul, you may end up coming up here, but that changes over time on the 20-year look, or is that 20 years out?
20 years out.
Okay, so you do have adequate and additional capacity under the plan.
Do we want that additional capacity? Silence.
Potentially better than a shortage.
Yeah.
Just one thing to add here is that a lot of that's yellow, that's 15,000 square foot lots. You can't build on lots that small up there. The terrain really is going to require significantly larger lots than that.
Yeah, I think most of the yellow up there is fairly flat and rolling. I don't think you have many ridges, you don't have any steep slopes whatsoever.
and pre-existing
In the
houses
yellow.
up there are on large lots.
Yeah.
There'll be more or less constraints, and maybe just to back up the point, the 15,000 would be a minimum, and then it's the owner's elective, whether they break those parcels down to the minimum, or their children elect to do that. So it does take time to achieve those. So really, when we're feeding the traffic model, we have to give worst case in terms of households and show how the area would build out. So to various degrees, we do have some slopes in there, and property owner elected will come into play as they look at land divisions.
Comment about that. The yellow areas are as a result of primarily input from the people in the area.
A buffering area.
So that's different than the original plan.
Yes, we provided some more room with larger lots and beveling, as was mentioned, because we did set up some principles and tenets to respect what's on the ground. And the range here is all in the single-family development range, as you had requested, and includes the very smallest lot size of 5,000. And on the yellow areas of the zoning maps, which are to the right, 1,500 square foot would be the smallest lot. 15,000 square feet, thank you.
Other questions, concerns, things you want integrated into this thing? Mitch, I would comment, following up on Larry's, and I hadn't really looked at these street drawings for that. His point's well taken.
Yes, it is.
You know, on a couple of them, and looking solely at the ones that have the center median, looks like we go from 17 feet on one of them, including the travel lane, the bike lane, to 19 feet on the widest one. But then we've got a center divider in there, landscape, that on one concept shows that the width of it varies, but it does have an 8-foot commercial sidewalk. The other one shows 13 feet wide planted median. If we can steal some more space either from the sidewalks or from the planted median in there to add in some more space in there on the roadway area so that you can get pull over.
I don't know if the volume's gonna be like E Street. There's a lot of houses up there.
Yeah, I don't know if.
I don't know if it'll be quite as heavy as E Street. But just the same, if there's no place for people to get over and
Yeah, volume
get
doesn't-
around.
It only takes one car.
Yeah, volume doesn't matter. If they
Yeah.
can't get past the one, they can't get past.
Yeah, and as Scott mentioned, that these are, those renderings, I mean, those are conceptual. We still have our standards that we have right now, and if we choose to modify those, these are a place that we could start and have that discussion.
The only other thing I would add, just so that you understand, this section is just one point across the street. In any place where that median is to be replaced at an intersection by a turn lane, you know, you've got a nominal 11,
Right.
12 feet. Yes, sir.
I have seen in other counties or other areas of the country where they've shared bike lanes and pedestrian ways. And they put a line through there, like a double line, and they put bike symbols on one side, pedestrian on the other. And so if you took, say, the 8-foot commercial sidewalk and put, maybe made 3 foot of it. We're probably looking at the wrong one, but the bicycle lane needs about 3 feet, and the walking lane maybe needs a little more. But that might squeeze in a little bit more into the street.
I appreciate the design ideas and the innovations, and I think these sections
You have a
are.
6-foot bike lane.
Yeah.
If you just remove that 6-foot bike lane from the street and put a 3-foot bike lane next to the 6-foot sidewalk, or
Yeah,
to a 4-foot sidewalk,
It's
then you
true.
get more street.
It's true, you can play with the width, and when it's in the side of the travelway, it needs shy distance, but we would go to the engineers to make sure so the innovation is where we put it, you know, with the pads on Ross Street or with the travel lanes. But I think there are ways to reconsider, and these really kind of draw out that conversation on where we might go with those long-term.
It's quite common to mix
Well, you can
bicycles
make the roads as wide as you
with
want, 'cause you're
pedestrians.
building them new.
Yeah, these would be new roadways, very good point.
Yeah.
Mitch, does that concept, does that endanger funding in regard to any roadways that we would build with potentially grant money that calls for intermodal?
Yeah, yes, I mean, if we didn't have those, if we didn't provide for those, yes.
I guess my question is though, can we only provide for them by transportation standards in the roadway? Or can they be provided in areas other than the roadway for the bicycles? Typically, we only see bike lanes on the
Yeah,
side.
I don't know. I would think that you probably could have them within your right of way, but maybe outside of that right of way. I don't know off the top of my head. And
It's a lot
Yeah.
safer for the bicyclists.
Trev's giving me the thumbs up, so
Also.
yeah.
I think
I can't think that I've ever seen one anywhere, other than dedicated bike trails and.
and
Well, I
this,
think along
this
Patton-
plan does have that.
Patton is one place that I always think of that is
Yeah, they're
very,
separated.
It's
very separated and bike path. Again, these are just concepts that right now, I mean, if development comes up here, what we have in front of us is our existing engineering standards for you know, local and collectors and that we would be utilizing. These were just concepts for us to look at, and then maybe if we wanted to, you know, provide that across the hillside there.
My point was is that you could keep all the landscaping and widen the road by 6 feet. Well,
Yeah, you still
maybe
got-
by 3 feet.
You still gotta pick up the space somewhere,
Well, it'd be 3 to 4 feet,
right,
5
what the
feet.
standard is.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what the sidewalk standard is, but whatever the minimum sidewalk standard is, plus about 3 foot for a bike lane. So 7 feet. So that would gain you 5 feet in the main line, main road. So it'd give you, instead of 11 feet of main road, it would give you 16 feet.
Yeah, which still doesn't give us room for a car and a fire truck
It's not enough room, 16 feet?
at 8 feet and 8 feet.
8
I
feet.
doubt that.
I think that's,
I doubt anybody wants to be in the left seat on that one. We'll be buying some mirrors and then some. Paul?
One of the reasons that you put bike lanes on the street, think about the car wash at Highway Fuel. In the old days, we had, the right-hand lane was jam up against the curb, which means if you want to make a right turn into Highway Fuel, you basically have to come to a dead stop. Not only that, if there's somebody coming out of the driveway that's going to make a left turn, there's decent odds that they've blocked you so that you can't turn in there, and now you're stopped in the street and traffic backs up behind you. If you move that lane 5 feet from the curb, it changes. You can now make that turn.
Yeah, and
Not only-
we would be doing that.
Not only that, but by having the center left turn lane, in the old days, that car had to wait for 4 lanes of traffic. Now you wait for one, pull into the left turn lane, and if you need to, you can wait for the other lane to clear.
Yeah, I wasn't.
As odd as it seems, going to 2 lanes plus a left turn lane plus bike lanes moves more traffic down East Street.
Oh, absolutely,
than-
I agree with
than-
that.
Than the old 4
I
lane
agree
setup.
with the East Street project is way better than what it was, but I'm not comparing that to that. If you made this, before East Street was, the outside lane was right next to the curb.
Yep.
And in some areas, there wasn't even a sidewalk. So the person had to walk down the street, more or less. Bicycles had to bicycle in the lane, which they have a right to do in Washington State. They can bicycle in the lane, they can hold up traffic. But it's dangerous for a bicycle to be in a traffic lane. So, the way that it was, you had just the width of it, and there were, I think, minimum lanes. They were fairly narrow lanes, and there were two lanes here and 2 lanes here, nothing in between. And if you stopped, you're exactly right. And I stopped to go into Chase Bank one day and almost got rear-ended. So I understand that, but it's so much safer for pedestrians on East Street now, and also for bicyclists. And the bicyclists are going to go wherever they want to go. So if you provide for them, it's going to be safer. Some of those bicyclists might be children, they might be adults. But my thinking is it's just a suggestion, something to consider, is to put the wideness in the street, which would allow for a car to pull to make a right turn without the car, and allow a car to go by.
And I just want to be clear real quick here, because in January, we're not talking about changing road standards and street sections and everything else. So these are great points and stuff, but we're not asking the commission or the council to change our road standards. These were,
Should we set this discussion aside for later?
it would be something else it was just to show what we could be looking at and getting, but we're not asking you to change anything in January.
I appreciate all of that input, and I guess, Mr. Mayor, as you kind of move forward, if the plan designations and the zoning look about right, they're again reflecting the preferences of the TAC and the information you gave us back at our last meeting, that would be the key as we move towards January.
Okay. Any last questions at this point? That was a long 20 minutes.
I'm a planner, sir.
Okay, we're gonna see how much more we can get through here, and if, as we move through planning commission, you are certainly welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you.
Won't feel horrible if you up and leave on us, though. So,
Thank you for inviting us.
you are more than welcome, thank you for being here.
Paul, thank you. Paul, can you, is that a free packet in front of Larry there?
Well, this is just stuff off the table out there.
Oh, that's yours though?
Yeah, I just got that out.
Okay. I just didn't get one of the thick packets that we've all been looking through.
Oh,
Dan,
I do have one.
Dan.
They got one here.
Okay, moving to item A, Public Works Professional Service Agreement with West Columbia Gorge Humane Society. We're gonna try and peel through as many of these as we can, council. So,
Good evening, Mayor and Council. 2 items to workshop this evening. First being a routine update or renewal with West Columbia Gorge Humane Society. No changes to this professional services agreement. Did want to clarify that the feral cat program is not part of this renewal. That's separate. So everything is status quo regarding doing this and extending it through the end of 2017. So that's the only change to, or what the proposed change is for that specific PSA with West Columbia Gorge.
any questions on the PSA with the Humane Society? Trevor, we're moving along. Supplemental Professional Services Agreement with Skillings Conley.
Yes, Skillings Conley has been assisting us with the TIB sidewalk project. 34th to 36th was brought to our attention that we needed to do a cultural resources study on that project, which is about a $6,000 amendment. The original contract cost was $20,000, going beyond the threshold. They needed to come before City Council. So they're proposing to leverage Archaeological Investigations Northwest to assist them with that work to move forward with the project. And again, extend the sidewalk from 34th to 36th on the north side of Evergreen Way, the old Evergreen Highway.
And there's no additional cost to that?
6,200.
62 on,
200, okay.
yes. For the design phase of the project.
Questions?
Why are we employing the archaeological services? Is it
We're
required?
required not only by TIB, but are also our own design standards to comply with SEPA as far as Environmental Policy Act.
Got it, thank
Make
you.
sure that it has all the appropriate review from all of our partners.
Got it.
Above and beyond the sidewalk improvements, we're also doing some stormwater infrastructure improvements, a couple of catch basins, as well as a dry well. So not just surface excavation, we'll be doing some other deep excavation to make the appropriate improvements on the north side of Evergreen out there, concurrent with the sidewalk improvements.
Trevor, while we're on sidewalks along Evergreen, do you want to say anything about the grant information we got over the weekend?
High level in regards to those two separate projects.
On the sidewalk one for Evergreen?
Yeah, so we've got preliminary feedback. First of all, with the sidewalk from 36th to 39th for the next phase of the project, that preliminarily looks like we're going to potentially be awarded funds for the next phase of that project to at least get sidewalk extended to 39th Street, as well as preliminary results in regards to a I guess I would call it a, not a restabilization, but more of a retrofit on Index Street on 27th for a rehabilitation, which is a high volume route, not only for commercial, but a lot of our businesses in the industrial park. They use that loop continuously with the underpass in 27th Street to make their way around Addy Street. So it looks like preliminarily that we're going to potentially be in the money on both of those projects. We're following up to give you confirmation on that.
And both of those, remind me, those aren't funded, as long as the programs are funded, those aren't in for fiscal year funding until 18?
Yep, they're above the line in 2018 through regional transportation through RTC.
good job to your department and Rob for getting those put together. And then also for any members of the council that are familiar with Marty Snell, who started out in the city of Washington, went to the city of Camas, is now Director of Community Development for Clark County. Marty was just named to the TIV board as well, so got another good local person on there who is very familiar with all of our area out here.
We'll
Sorry.
loop back on that confirmation.
Yep.
Once we're notified, for sure. Any questions in regards to the Skillings Conley supplemental professional services to conduct archaeological services on the project? Okay, the next is a supplemental with,
The next two.
yeah, next to Groundwater Solutions. It's actually a supplemental for 3 and 4. So the original contract amount for Groundwater Solutions to assist us with #1 well replacement and hydrogeological services was $57,000. At supplemental number 2, which was executed executively, it was our understanding and brought to our attention that it was beyond the 15% threshold. So we're bringing that to your attention, that even though we did have that supplemental number 3 executed dating back to February, 22nd day of February, that it indeed does need council action in conformance with your policies. The scope of that specific work was to conduct microscopic particulate analysis, which the acronym for that is MPA, basically due diligence for us in developing that well, that we have no nexus or connection to surface water. So when we develop the groundwater well in the sand and gravel aquifer, we need to have MPA analysis conducted to basically inform ecology and health that there's not a connection. So we did get that first round of MPA, particulate analysis results back, and there is no connection. There's low risk. As you read through the scope and the amendment that took place, the recommendation from Groundwater Solutions is to do a second review of test, which is during the summer season, so you get different water levels, table levels in the Washougal River, to make sure that there's not a connection in the summer season as well, since we've already performed the winter season. So that was the executive summary, if you will, of supplemental number 3 that took place. And supplemental number 4 is for additional testing to further develop the drilling and development of the well. We originally scoped to drill 150 feet below surface based on Groundwater Solutions recommendation and the material that we ran into at 150 feet, sand and gravels, which is ideal for transmissivity for water production and extraction. They recommended moving and drilling an additional 30 feet. So we did finish full development at 180 feet. So supplemental 4 covers those specific services for water quality testing.
Questions on either one of those?
What was the total increase then in the project? Was that?
The first supplemental was
7,000.
1,600, and the second was 2,200. The second one was for a hydraulic project analysis, which we needed to do as well. The third was the one that I went into a little bit more detail in regards to the groundwater under the influence and doing the NPA testing, which was at 5,600.
Okay.
And then the most recent one, supplemental 4, is I think right at $1,500.
Okay.
So in the area of 11,000 over the entire project?
Yeah, so we went from origination of 57,000 to 68 for hydrotech or hydrogeological services. That's not the drilling of the well, but the professional service and oversight to develop it.
Don't we build contingencies into these projects?
We do.
So are we
Typically,
still
depending,
within the budget, or is this an amendment?
overall budget, yes, we're still within budget. Yep, for putting #1 well back online.
Are they completed out there? Looks like they've demobilized other than maybe some fencing.
Yep, they sunk the casing and they were putting in the screen last week. And so we'll be going into pump testing within the next couple months.
Cool.
And developing the actual building and wellhead and all the treatment and appurtenances in the middle of spring. And ideally be back online since it's our alternative water resource aquifer to the lower well field back in production summer 17.
Good. Questions on either one of those PSAs? Okay, Trevor, thank you.
Okay.
Jennifer, fire and local agreement.
Yes, we have a slight modification that we need to do to the interlocal agreement with Camus on how we do the annual true-up, just to make it clear on how we're going to do it in the future. This method has already been audited by the state auditors 2 years ago, and they agreed with these changes as that's how we were doing it at the time. So just adding the, we're going to use the budget allocation factors with the actual expenses. So the interlocal will be at the council meeting next, actually not next week, on the 5th, to make these changes effective.
Questions? Thank you. Mitch, coming back to you, professional services agreement with E2.
Yes, this is a professional service agreement with Eric Eisman with E2. Eric was here earlier this evening. This is to provide planning services for the 2017 to help with the workload. Again, he's helping us now while Jessica is out on maternity leave, but also to help us through the next year as we deem appropriate. I do need to note that in my, I was overzealous in this, and I have this on consent agenda tonight for you to take action on. It is in the approved budget. If you're not comfortable with it, approving it again this evening, it can wait until the 5th, but I did put it on for a consent agenda approval for this evening. That is, it's a $50,000 PSA with E2. And
How much was it, Mitch?
$50,000.
$50,000.
$50,000.
50,000.
50,000.
5 times 10 to the 4th.
PSA with Wallace Engineering.
Same, this is my professional service agreement with Wallace Engineering to provide community development engineering review for land use projects. Wallace has done this now for us for a number of years, and this is a professional service agreement for them to continue in that capacity. Again, this is a $50,000 professional service agreement already in the approved budget for 2017. Again, I did put it on consent agenda this evening, but if you are not comfortable with that, then I have no problem with that moving till the 5th.
All these consulting agreements, is it time to look at additional staff? That'd be economic.
Trevor and I have had that conversation for an ongoing for a while, yes. On the engineering side, most definitely. Yeah, the majority of this is passed through right now, so.
Okay, moving to final plat, Washougal River Road subdivision.
Thank you. Washougal River Road subdivision is a 17-lot subdivision. It's located at 2105 North Washougal River Road. It was approved by the hearing examiner in Clark County in July 19th, 2006. Shortly thereafter, we annexed the property into the city. The recession hit and it sat for a while, but they are completing it and wrapping it up. Our code and state law requires the legislative body to approve a final plat, and that is what is in front of you this evening, to authorize the mayor to sign the final plat for the Washougal River Road subdivision through approval of the consent agenda.
Well,
we may not have a choice here, or this may be ministerial, but I'm looking at 3,100, 3,200 square foot lots here.
3,000. 3,066, 3,044, 3,043?
Yeah, 3,100 square foot lots.
Less than that.
Yeah, this is R16 zoning. It's a multifamily.
Okay.
Complex zoning.
So that's what this would be, is apartments?
No,
It could be.
They-
It's not what this is.
Okay.
Small home lots, but could be significantly more dense than what this is.
And that's consistent with the city zoning presently as opposed to what the county did?
Yes, they actually developed it under our standard.
Okay, thank you.
Is this the one we got email comments on?
No, this is not.
This is not the green,
No, it is
No.
not.
Nope.
Oh, do you have a map or a picture of it by any chance?
It's in your packet,
Oh, it is in our packet,
Uh,
okay.
Agenda Bill 9816.
That's when it butts right up to the condos.
No, after you go past North O Street, River Road comes around
Right there on the left. Right there on the left.
on the right, if you're headed out River Road.
On the right.
I see that just a second. See, here's River Road.
It'll be on the left. Going out.
And the current
Oh,
zoning is.
you're right.
AR-16.
You're right.
That's the old rodeo ground. This is
Yeah.
condos, and there's the city, county shop.
Can you explain the conservation habit zone there?
Yeah, there's a stream that flows through there, and they were required to protect that and buffer it, and they have several plantings that are going to be put into that area.
Keep in mind, this is on the south side of the road.
This is north.
North.
This is on the north side of the road.
Butts up to the old rodeo grounds, where those condos are.
Just east of the county.
I'm lost.
Yeah.
You know where the county shop is?
Oh, the next parcel to the east of it.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I'm not finding the map in my iPad. Oh, okay.
I was trying to get a map up.
Yeah.
So while Mitch is getting that map, just a reminder procedurally where this is out, the hearings examiner approved the preliminary plat after a notice and comment and public hearing. Then we approved engineering plans and the infrastructure was constructed and accepted by the city. And for whatever reason, the statute then requires a ministerial act to be taken by the council at that point to authorize the final plat. But this project is constructed. All that's left now is the homes.
Is that the same position we find ourselves in with the green estates as well? It will be ministerial? Okay.
Once it ultimately comes back to the council for a final plat, yeah.
So
I can tell you why that it's that way. It's basically to give the property owner and developer assurance that he can develop pursuant to his plans. That's why they do it.
So this is the property that we're talking about right now.
Sure.
This is the Greenview Estates, that, and that, and that. That's the site that we're talking about right now.
Thank you.
Okay, questions?
No.
North Twenty Development Agreement.
I'll ask Trevor and Christine to come on up. We're continuing our discussion on the development agreement for North 20 and Granite 3. So I'll just really quick for North 20 again to get ourselves oriented. Here we are, we're in the northwest urban growth area. Again, this is the ordinance 1801 that the moratorium is in place now, and that's why they're seeking a development agreement to proceed. Property again laid out with the preferred alternative plan, showing the road layout as well as the zoning designations. And this is the latest that I got from Trevor today, up there on the map. And I'm not sure, one of the things that we talked about, and I'll walk through this first part, and then I'll let Trevor go from there. But this is our existing road section. We had a lot of road discussions earlier this evening. So after our last meeting, we talked about what are our current road standards. This is our current road standard for a residential collector. It's kind of hard to see, but it's a 70-foot right-of-way. There are 10-foot travel lanes, 5-foot bike lanes, and then 8-foot parking lanes on that as well. This was the rendering that's still up back there that Berger had put up, that they were looking at for this area. And you remember I noted earlier too that both concepts, both Trevor's, the developer's concept here, as well as the Berger product, we both came to the same conclusion that we didn't want parking along that collector. So neither one of that would be a modification for that.
Okay, so, sorry, because that was one of the questions from earlier, and I was confused by the drawings because we had talked about not having parking.
Yeah, this is they don't have parking. This is their collector. This was Berger's proposal within that 70, it's actually a 72-foot right-of-way. But there's no parking on this, in this plan. And this is the proposed modified collector that the developer is proposing for this section through their development site. And so as part of the development agreement, we can modify, basically it is a road modification, and of our existing standard, that first standard that I showed you. One of the things that I will point out, and I've talked to the developer about this too, is that this was a concern that came up about the travel lanes. I think Councilman Greenlee brought this up last time, that was a 9-foot travel lane. Our existing standard requires a 10-foot travel lane, and we had that discussion with the developer, and they are more than willing to have that be a 10-foot travel lane on their proposed modified collector. So the travel lanes would stay the same at 10 feet. There would be, on their proposal, they have bike lanes, but then they also have the detached pedestrian path. So if we look at this proposal, and there's lots of reasons I think that Trevor and Christine can talk about, and there are documents that are in front of you that I got late today that kind of go to this, and it's part of their argument, if you will, for the modification. So that is their rendering of what the proposed road would look like. And then I guess I'll leave it here. Is this a better one for you to?
Well, yeah, this kind of explains what we were trying to. Oh.
Excuse me, before you leave there, what kind of parking have you got in this area, since you don't have any on the street?
Well, we have, so all the neighborhoods will have parking within the neighborhood, but this collector is.
This collector is here.
No houses will take access to this collector. The only thing that will take access to the collector will be the local access neighborhood roads.
Okay, so within the neighborhood, you've got 2-car garages and 2 parking spaces on the apron?
Exactly.
Okay,
Yep.
now I remember.
And
Thank you.
on-street parking.
And off-street parking,
Both sides.
on-street parking,
On-street parking, except for that one collector.
except for the collector.
And there are no driveways on that collector.
And if I could just, so I want to be clear about what I want to put in front of council, and then really kind of the feedback that we're looking for, especially as it pertains to this, as part of this development agreement, is that this is a road that is going to continue to the east. This is a road that is going to continue to the west. So we want to get the design of it ironed out, and we want to know, what that's going to look like. So as we have other properties that come in and to develop, and so as part of this process through the development agreement, you can approve a modified standard, and that's what the developer is asking you to do with this their road section. We just want to make sure that that's clear. If we capture what it is that council wants, that we capture that within the development agreement, so we can be specific about that. And then we look at other development agreements as they come forward, and then in our standards, as we develop an overall transportation plan for the area, we have that be our basically new section for that collector that runs through there. Yeah, and we are from assuming that from an engineering standpoint, everything else, it functions and works fine. We are comfortable with this modified section.
I really want to see a 10-foot drive lane, and some thought about emergency vehicle passage. What does that mean? With 15 feet, that's really not enough for a fire truck to pass a car pulled over even to the curb. I like the idea of the separated pedestrian path. I think that's a great idea. And I don't have a problem with the pedestrian path on only one side.
Yeah, so Paul, on this one where you've got the 15 feet, you've actually got 30. There is no medium divider there, so the fire trucks can actually pull into the other lane if they need to.
Right, but you're gonna, if you have traffic, if you have cars on both sides, you're gonna take 16, 18 feet of that total. And you've got, what, 10, 19, 28. So I suppose you've got enough.
You've got 30.
Yeah, there'll be 30 feet will be the paved section. There'll be two 10-foot travel lanes and two 5-foot
Okay.
bike lanes.
All right.
Right, it just got wider than what I showed
If-
there,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, if that works for fire, then I'm fine.
So they'd be going in the opposite direction of traffic to get by, you're saying?
Could be, or just sliding over a little bit here and there. Which, as long as people are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Are there left turn lanes going into those major, I mean, because there's, what, 200 houses or something, or lots in that northern area? Will there be left turn lanes and right turn lanes going into those major areas, or they just turn off the street?
We're planning for them to just turn off the street.
And then a question for you, Mitch, with Berger, with the infiltration center section there, the planted median, other than the water purification type system, what is another reason why they have that median? Is it for aesthetic value?
Yes, from their standpoint, yes, they were giving us an idea and a concept that could be for, give a different idea for that collector moving through there. I think what Trevor will talk about here in a minute is that there's issues with drainage and whatnot on their site specifically, and that's some of the information that I handed out to you. I don't think we necessarily need to get into the overall details of that because it is somewhat boring, but basically their point is that while infiltration is great, it doesn't necessarily work on this site.
But there was aesthetic value to
It was aesthetic,
having
yeah. I mean,
median as well.
Yeah, and I think that, there's aesthetic value to their proposed section having a detached, pedestrian path on the high side there with the 10-foot pedestrian path. And you have an area there, at least on this design now, is about 17 feet that would be for landscaping there between the two.
But we'd be giving up a foot on each bike path and a sidewalk on the north side and a median.
Let me go back real quick to, our bike lanes are 5 feet in our existing
Oh, okay,
standard.
this was just the Berger.
Yeah,
Sure
it's
had
just
them
the
at
Berger,
6 foot.
exactly.
Okay.
Again, that dealing with, just from a different aesthetic. Yeah, this is our section this is what we currently have right now. This is what we would be modifying through the development agreement and a modification. We did work that through staff and city, public works director, city engineer, and they were comfortable with that proposed modification as well.
Yeah, I'd like to continue to hear from Berger and the public that lives in that area, how they feel about it, because they'll be transitioning it as well.
Right now, there is no public in that area.
Yeah, well, near it, as close to it as possible. I guess it looks down on it or
So
across.
I get the aesthetic value of it, who takes care of the medians and who takes care of the landscaping that's on the sides?
That would be us. It's a dedicated right-of-way.
And the irrigation as well.
We might want to talk to them about who might, in their modified section, we might want to talk to them about whether we actually take that right away or whether it's an easement for landscaping and pet access and then have the HOA take care of it.
I was gonna say, can the HOA take care of that portion of it? I don't know that we wanna even have contractors taking care of something that's literally in the travel lanes.
We have some more conversation to have about the deal points about this right-of-way section, but I think it would be good to get some feedback from the council about the notion. Right now, notwithstanding the moratorium, they could build to the existing section, which is not on this page. That's the current standard.
Right.
What they're asking for is to modify that to this other one. Show the big one of it, right there, to that one. So in some respects, this is a pretty cool section. It's a different feel. You put your, a 10-foot wide ped path, which really, it says ped path, but, and you got bike lanes in the travel lane, but I wouldn't be surprised to see bikes up there. You know, where would you want your family to ride their bike? And it's 10 feet wide. And you get this big landscaped bank. And then, and Mitch hasn't gotten to this yet, but probably right up against the side of that ped path, and then on the other side, right up against that 5-foot width, will be a common fence that'll be put in by the developer, a consistent standard for the entire length of the collector to be maintained by the homeowners association, which is the ideal scenario for doing that. So there's, that look would be there as well, versus what our current standard is. Now, of course, Berger has proposed this other more boulevard-looking type of collector. Takes more property. It's a bigger take and more expensive, both to build and to maintain. And there's maybe some technical reasons why it's not as feasible. But that's all up for the council to decide, right? You have to approve this development agreement, so this is a deal point. But I think we've got some work to do around, just like with the fence, about who maintains all of this stuff.
And the issue about the fencing is was in the packet that was on your table in front of you earlier this evening.
Paul?
Just personally, I'm not a fan of kind of center islands, boulevards, and residential collectors or even arterials. In more downtown or in a more urbanized area, I think it makes more sense. The city of Santa Fe, New Mexico does that. And they have these nice boulevards, but they also have the local businesses get to put a sign there that says maintained by Days Inn or whatever. And they pay to have that planted and maintained. That doesn't make sense in a residential neighborhood. So I, especially given how tight we are on maintenance for parks and streets, and it's going to get worse with the required stormwater, I'm not really in favor of center medians.
And that's where this would come out of, is storm, wouldn't come out of streets or parks.
Isn't this being called an urban collector or not?
It's a
residential.
Residential collector.
And that's because it serves residential property.
Yeah.
Trevor?
Thank you. So, I mean, Mitch and David have done a really good job explaining generally what we were trying to achieve, but I would like to back up a little bit. So we had talked about the Berger collector, and I've been calling this sort of a modified collector, but I do want to back up and make it clear that I'm not modifying the Berger collector, because I had never seen that until just recently. So what we started out to do was to take a look at the standard collector, which is the standard today, and we had some concerns with building that really wide street with parking on both sides, kind of a sweeping street downhill through this area of pretty steep cross slopes. We were concerned about speed. It'd be a wonderful place to race down. I can just imagine people really going fast. So first thing we wanted to do is narrow that up a little bit to try and slow people down. And interestingly, we kind of came to the same conclusion that Berger did, that we really don't need parking along that street. So that could help resolve that issue. And then the other thing we looked at is we do have fairly steep side slopes. So we're building this road into a hill. And so if you have a really flat road and wide road and a cross slope, it really eats up a lot of real estate, and it's expensive to build. So what our idea is to elevate that pedestrian path, and the initial idea was really just to lessen the impact on the slope and make it conform with the slope a little better. But I do also like like David also mentioned, that's where I'd have my family riding, my 7-year-old be riding her bike up there with us while we're walking along. And maybe the serious bikers, like frankly, if I went riding through there, I'd be riding on the street in the bike path, but, cause I don't like competing with pedestrians. That's a dangerous thing too. But, so it has both, is the idea. So you can separate the bikers, so you don't have to wait for them while you're going up this hill, or down it. So that was our concept. And so what I've done is put together some drawings that show exactly what the impact of wider, flatter roads is on these steep side slopes.
I don't know what you want.
Let's go, if you can say back with the one you just were, yeah, this one right here kind of explains. So this shows, I'm comparing it to the Burge proposed, and I just found out tonight that that's not really up for, I thought that was going to be the standard maybe by the time we got through with our developer agreement.
Your development could set the standard.
Okay, so I'm arguing sort of with that one, or showing the difference between ours and that one, but it's the exact same thing with the current standard. It's the same issues, because it's a pretty similar section. It's just that instead of parking, we've got a lot of swales in the Berger. So with our concept, and this is in basically our steepest cross slope, to build our road, you can do that within a 101-foot footprint. By the time you actually catch up with the side slopes. With the Berger, it takes 140 feet. Now that's kind of the extreme example, but on the next slide I show what happens when you go through the entire collector. I designed that road using both scenarios, and you can see that the dashed line is the Berger or the standard collector running through there, and you can see how much wider that is by the time you catch up with the slopes. And you can see how that, right where it says collector on there, you can see how it really bulges out, and that's that section that I showed you before where it's the steepest cross slope. So the difference between the two concepts is, and for essentially the same transportation capacity, we're building essentially the same road in terms of getting cars from point A to point B, but ours would take a little over 3.5 acres, while the current standard, or the Berger, would take just about 5.5 acres to do. And ours would require about 5,000 yards of cut and 5,000 yards of fill. And the standard concept would be about 12,000 yards of cut and about 8,000 yards of fill. We could make that balance, but it would still be about 10,000 yards of cut and 10,000 yards of fill after all is said and done. So it's about twice as much. Even just adding from a 60-foot to a 70-foot right-of-way, it doubles the amount of cut and fill required. So I guess the other big difference between ours and the Bergers is that Berger provides a lot of well, it's designed to provide a lot of stormwater treatment, and the swales and the aesthetic sort of park right down the middle of the road, which we just found out based on our infiltration tests that we wouldn't really be able to utilize any of that stuff for stormwater treatment because our property just doesn't infiltrate. And I backed up and looked at the rest of that section of collector that that goes through ours, and the entire north or east-west section of that collector is about 6,000 feet long, and only about 1,000 of it is within soils that, according to Clark County, could be feasible for infiltration or for this sort of rain garden concept. So really, the extra stormwater benefit, I think, is it looks pretty, but it really wouldn't work. We might be able to incorporate some swales off on the side of the road to do some treatment that's going to be required. I mean, we have to treat it one way or the other. But for us to have that flexibility, Mitch, can we go back to the section, my original, back one more, right here. I would like to make one point. So the pedestrian path, it shows to be 12 feet off of that there's 5 feet flat and then 12 feet back is the pedestrian path. That 12 feet is intended for really the steepest cross slope area, and that gets us up the hill. That's the whole point of that thing. But when it's not as steep, we can kind of meander that a little bit and get it closer, or bring it down a little so it's not 4 feet above the road if we need to use for stormwater treatment or something like that. But it's flexible. It can kind of move around instead of being pegged up against the far end of the right of way. So I guess in summary, that's our concept. We wanted to try to conform with the landscape, try and fit into the slope a little better, and in the end, I like the idea of having that elevated pedestrian path.
Quick questions, we're at 6:35 already.
Yeah, I just had, Mitch, is there an engineering standard for medians that doesn't include an infiltration system? Like you'd want it to be a minimum of a certain width?
Not in our current standards. I'm not aware
But
of
just in
one.
civil engineering in general, 3
Maybe.
feet?
I don't know. I'm not a civil engineer.
I'm not a
I'm
civil
not
engineer
the
either, and we
engineer.
don't have our city engineer here
Sorry.
tonight.
Okay.
You are.
I'm sure that there are street standards in some communities that provide for a center boulevard, and I don't know that there's a minimum width of that treatment for safety, because in many roads that handle the same average daily trips, there's nothing separating opposing traffic, so I don't know if you know.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's a standard, like once you put one there, if it has to be a certain width. It seems like I've seen them all different sizes.
I'm
but
just
I haven't
wondering
run
if you
into
could
them
go to
before.
a much smaller size if it didn't include an infiltration or swale system. I personally like the boulevard look. I think it enhances a neighborhood, but I understand now why you didn't represent that in there, because you were basing it off the current designs that the city has. And in light of that, I think it's a good plan. But I do like what Berger suggested for our future as a city too, in regards to that center median.
Where it can work.
Yeah.
Yeah, you certainly have Mill Plain where you've got sections that have absolutely none, and then you've got sections of center median that's landscaped, weeds,
Yeah.
and then none. You certainly got it on Lake Road and First Avenue, portions of that, as they build it out. I don't know what their plans are to do in that area.
That's one area where when I looked at this, it kind of jogged my memory, and I forget the name of the street, but it's in Camas there. It's on the south side of the lake. Is that lake?
Yeah.
Over toward Costco. And you have the big business park campuses to the south. So they do have a sidewalk on the north side. That's the one difference. And then you do have driveways, interestingly enough, for some of those homes on there. But on the south side, you've got kind of a meandering wide path, and you see people running, biking, jogging, skateboarding, and there's a nice landscaped area between the street and the sidewalk, and then you've got that path, and it feels really nice and safe and separated from the road. It's not identical to this, but it's one of the things that's close by that this reminded me of a little bit. I could see us talking about how the DA would describe what happens within there at 17 feet, 5 flat, 12 at slope. That's the biggest. It might get smaller. I could see us, working together to make that very aesthetically pleasing.
Any other quick questions for Trevor, or do folks have their questions answered, at least for tonight? This is gonna come back for a hearing on the 5th, so we've certainly got time to talk about it, bring other things up as well. I just don't wanna hold him here if he doesn't need to stay through the next meeting.
The only other thing that I would mention is that if council has other questions or comments, feel free to shoot them my way, and then I will obviously be in touch with Trevor. But there is an action item tonight on consent agenda to set the hearing for this item for December 5th.
Okay, with that, we're adjourned from this meeting. We'll be